G'day guys, how's it going? I'm Aza Whitnall and this is AZAWorld Sport, and how good does it feel to have the Premier League back? The opening weekend kicked off with a bang. There were shocks, there were thrillers. I think for quite a few teams there was the typical opening day weekend, either draw or 1-0 or close game result, where you don't really read too much into it necessarily because it's the opening game of the season. Players still haven't got their fitness back and teams really haven't had that long to gel because they've been jetting all around the world, playing all of these different friendly games. But I also think that this weekend showed the potential that some teams have this season to do really well, but also highlighted quite a few fears that other teams may have for the season ahead. And obviously the biggest shock of the weekend was that the champions Leicester lost 2-1 on the opening day of the season away to Hull. Now Hull are the favourites to get relegated this season because going into the game they only had 13 first-team players really for the game, and going into this season they haven't really bought anyone. To coincide with that, they lost their manager Steve Bruce, so it's Mike Phelan, who's the caretaker manager there, who's running the team for the time being. Leicester, on the other hand, even though they lost Conte, have made some very good signings this summer, and despite not getting the best of results throughout pre-season, have actually looked fairly sharp, to say the least. Now, I wouldn't really read too much into this. Yes, it was an opening day surprise, but I think Leicester, to say it safe, they were pretty unlucky throughout the game. Safe to say Jamie Vardy didn't have him on his shooting boots. He missed a couple of what really for his standards as of last season was sitters. But you could really see the potential Leicester have, particularly their speed. Musa looked threatening, although you can see that he's going to take a little bit of time just to gel into the Premier League and also gel that partnership with Vardy so it looks nice and tidy moving forward. But honestly, all right, I know they only lost 3 games last season. All right, now I know they've already lost 1 this season, but don't read into it too much. No one's necessarily expecting Leicester to win the Premier League title again, but I still see them having a very solid season and finishing in the top half. I actually think they're going to finish around 7th this year. So Leicester fans, don't read too much into it. But let me know your thoughts on the game. How do you guys feel that you guys played? Do you have any worries for the season ahead? And Hull fans, obviously massive surprise. Do you think you're going to shock the Premier League, almost do a bit of a Leicester, not win the league, but surprise everyone by staying up and basically, throwing pie in everyone's face in that sense? Let me know in the comments below. Obviously, the other major game of the weekend was Arsenal versus Liverpool, and this was the thriller of the weekend. It ended 4-3 to Liverpool at the Emirates Stadium, but at one point it looked absolutely dire for Arsenal as they were 4-1 down. Now, going into the game, Arsene Wenger was saying how ready his team were for this season and how even though he hadn't made any signings, he was still more than confident that Arsenal would be challenging for this title. Based on what I saw on Sunday, I don't have the same confidence as him. I don't think many Arsenal fans do. I think, again, Wenger has shown a lot of stubbornness over the summer, and his reluctance to buy anyone, for example, Lacazette, who, by the way, got a hat-trick on the opening weekend of Ligue 1, has once again come back to bite Arsenal in the arse, effectively, because Liverpool in the second half absolutely destroyed them. Well, for the majority of it anyway, and showed just how weak they were. I mean, I know that Arsenal did have injuries. Arsenal always have injuries. All right, they've had more injuries than any other team in the Premier League history. That's just one of the things about Arsenal. Not quite sure what it is, whether they've got something in the water at Arsenal, but they certainly need to address that at some point. But you could see just from the fact that they had players missing, that they were going to struggle. They started with obviously the 2 young centre-backs in Callum Chambers and Rob Holding. Now, even though they had those 2, and Laurent Koscielny was watching from the stands, there are a lot of reports saying that he was simply rested because he hadn't been back from the Euros in time. Now, if that's the case, that's a pretty poor excuse in my opinion anyway. If I was Koscielny, I'd be wanting to play in that game. All right, and I know that Payet may have started on the bench, and there were other players that played at the Euros, but a lot of them have actually come back to play for their teams on the opening weekend of the Premier League. So the fact he's rested Koscielny for such a massive game as well, when you know that the last few seasons you've lost on the opening game of the season and straight away your fans are on your back, just a very confusing decision for me. But, it's Wenger. He is a great manager, but it does make you wonder if his stubbornness is getting the better of him moving forward. Now, they face Leicester next away, and if they play like they did in the opening kind of 15 minutes of that second half, then they're in real danger because Leicester have got the speed just like Liverpool had the speed. Now, talking about Liverpool, they looked fantastic for the majority of the game. First half, not so much. It took a very special goal from Philip Coutinho, that beautiful free kick, to really get Liverpool going. But when they did get going, for the next 20 minutes, they blew Arsenal away. Like I said, at one point they were 4-1 up. Their new signings looked good. Mane looked class. And I think in pre-season you could really see how he was going to fit into that team. But yeah, based on that performance and the way that I think Klopp is going to get Liverpool playing, and the fact they don't have European football to worry about this season, Liverpool are one of my favourites to make it into the top 4 this season. I think Klopp could really do something special with them, and it's because Klopp has got this ability of buying players who aren't like the top category players, but turning them into unbelievable team workers. So it's going to be fantastic to see how that team gel together under Klopp's guidance moving forward this season. Moving on to the Manchester teams, and these are of course the 2 teams that everyone is talking about because of everything that's happened over the summer there. They have spent more money than any other teams in the Premier League. City spending over 150 million. United spending over 145 million. Obviously, probably the 2 most famous coaches in the world in Pep Guardiola and Jose Mourinho managing them. And United, of course, broke the world record transfer fee to sign Paul Pogba this summer. So there's been a lot of hype around Manchester. How did the teams get on? They won. I'm not going to lie, it's what I expected, it's what everyone expected. It was good to see United playing with a bit more purpose. I thought Zlatan Ibrahimovic, United fans are going to love him this season because even though he didn't have he wasn't everywhere, but he has that presence and he just seemed to kind of go about the game at his own pace. And because of it, United, I just thought it looked like they dismantled Bournemouth the way that they would have dismantled a team lower in the league under Sir Alex Ferguson. They didn't seem to struggle in the same way they did with Louis van Gaal or David Moyes in charge. So straight away, I think that's a really good sign for Jose Mourinho's Manchester United. And the fact that you got Zlatan, he's kicked off. And to be honest with you, I think he's going to be perfect for the Premier League. He's got the size, he's got the power, he's got the confidence in himself. And you could see that by the way he took his goal and the way that he performed over that game. Martial got 2 assists. It's going to be cracking to see how he performs throughout the season now that he's had a whole season to develop into the Premier League. And we all know how good he was last season. And now they've got Pogba coming into the team against Southampton for week 2. It's exciting for Manchester United to see what they can do this season. Definitely title contenders in my eyes. Manchester City. Now, this is the interesting one because Pep was doing things that we've never seen in the Premier League before. We all saw how he was bringing his fullbacks in and how for most of the game they were actually playing almost like midfielders. So he was literally having 2 at the back for quite a fair bit of the game. They controlled the play. You would expect that from a Pep Guardiola side, but there's clearly work to be done. He hasn't quite got through to his players necessarily in the way he would have wanted to, because let's face it, they did struggle for certain periods of the game to really break Sunderland down and get some real clear opportunities. I mean, the penalty Sunderland gave away in the 4th minute was just the most ridiculous challenge. Why, the defender decided to do, I forget the name of the player, but why he decided to tackle that way, it was always going to be a penalty. I don't see any reason why he was protesting at the time. But obviously Aguero stuck it away like you'd expect. And again, I think moving forward, when you see the potential that City have bought this summer, because they've bought quite a few young but classy players, it's going to be exciting to see how, over the next coming weeks, as they gel together more, just how good they become under Pep Guardiola. But, there were signs against Sunderland that against a better side, they could get picked off. So that's my only theory. Obviously, it's going to be very different in the Premier League to the likes of the Bundesliga and La Liga for Pep Guardiola. Every team plays very differently, whereas in those leagues, everyone almost tries to emulate the biggest side, so it's a bit easier for them. But for example, they face Stoke next, and I'm really looking forward to seeing Pep Guardiola go up against who I think are one of the toughest sides in the Premier League to face. And I'm not saying that because everyone always has that joke about, could you do it on a cold Monday night in Stoke? But I'm being serious. Stoke are a very solid Premier League side, and you can always guarantee they're going to get some real key results throughout the season. So watch the space. It's going to be interesting to see how they get on over the coming weeks with Pep Guardiola. But again, exciting times for both teams in Manchester. Another positive, I know I slated him throughout the Euros, but for Manchester City, Raheem Sterling, to see him playing the way he was under Guardiola, exciting times. This is the Raheem Sterling that I've wanted to see, and hopefully under Guardiola, he can become the man or the player that every England fan hopes he can become. So I just think it was a bit of mismanagement last season. He didn't have the best form going into the Euros, and maybe he should have been given a rest for this summer. But this is a new season. Forget about the Euros now. Every England fan is trying to. and let's focus on this season, and hopefully Sterling can reach the heights that we all hope he can. Now, on to Conte at Chelsea, and again they looked fairly solid against West Ham United. It was always going to be a tough game to open up against them, particularly after last season. Hazard looked back on form, and hopefully he's going to continue that this season for Chelsea. He said he wants a fresh start. I think a lot of the players there do, and I think it's going to be an exciting season for them too. Again, top 4 contenders in my eyes, and they showed that when they were playing against West Ham. I thought they were good for the win, although West Ham did battle very hard. Again, I expect West Ham to have a solid season, and I expect them to be pushing for a European place, but more the Europa League than the Champions League, just sheerly because of how much money all of the bigger teams have spent this summer. But again, from West Ham, good solid performance. I think you guys are going to have a very good season and a lot to look forward to with your new stadium. If you can get an unbeaten run going there, that could really do you guys some good throughout the season. So, potential there. With the other games, a lot of them were draws. We saw Southampton and Watford draw 1-1. We saw Middlesbrough draw 1-1 with Stoke. We saw Tottenham draw 1-1 with Everton. But a couple of things that I'm excited about there. We saw Ross Barkley and Eric Lamela get on the score sheet. I know you could say that Barkley's was a free kick that just went all the way through, but it's good to see him back on the score sheet. And hopefully, again, under Koeman, a manager that I rate really highly, he's going to be able to help the likes of Ross Barkley, who I'm sure, as we all Englishmen know, has got an awful lot of potential. He just needs someone to really open that up, and hopefully Koeman's going to be the man to do that. And with Lamela, we saw him becoming the player that every Spurs fan hoped he would become last season, and to get on the score sheet on the opening game, it's going to do him the world of confidence, and I can see him again just having an absolutely fantastic season for Tottenham, and maybe we can really see this potential in him that made Spurs pay that over £30 million for him. So exciting times for both of those players, and again, Tottenham, I'm expecting them to be Champions League contenders this season. I think they're going to have a fantastic season. They may need to add 1 or 2 more players because they've got the Champions League and the Premier League, just because they've got a fantastic starting 11, but I've always worried about their squad as a whole. I thought they've bought fantastically so far, particularly with Wanyama and Janssen, but maybe 1 or 2 more phases might just make that squad so much more solid than what it is for both of those competitions. Obviously, we've got the FA Cup and League Cup as well, but yeah, Tottenham Champions League contenders for me this season. We saw Burnley lose at home to Swansea. Guidlin's a very underrated manager in my opinion. I thought he did a fantastic job there last year, and in going into this season, I can see you guys aiming for mid-table maybe with him, although I expect you to finish top of the kind of lower end, if you see what I mean. So not in the top 10, but maybe just below this season. I think, again, Swansea, you're a solid Premier League team, and I think we're going to see that this season. Burnley, unfortunately, I just don't feel like they have the quality to stay up. I know they push Swansea hard and close, but I think that's all it is. I think they just lack a little bit of Premier League quality. They're a bit of a yo-yo team at the moment, going up and down, and unfortunately I think we're going to see that again this season. And then the final result was obviously Crystal Palace beating Crystal Palace losing at home to West Bromwich Albion. I was a little bit surprised by that. I thought Palace would do better. They've bought fairly well in the summer. I thought Andros Townsend was a good buy. I know they've just sold Balassi for good money. Whether that means that Benteke is going to potentially come in, could again boost the squad. But again, I see Palace finishing around mid-table, or in the lower half of the Premier League table anyway. West Brom, I see staying up, but again, just having again a fairly solid season, getting 1 or 2 decent results throughout the season as it goes along. But a solid start for them, something that maybe wasn't necessarily expected. So yeah, that pretty much sums up the opening weekend of the Premier League. So please let me know in the comments below what your highlights were of this weekend. Were there any surprises that you didn't really expect to happen in terms of results or player performances or goal scorers? Who do you think played really well? What do you think of Guardiola and Mourinho's starts to the Premier League as well as Conte's? Yeah, lots to talk about. Very exciting. And let me know who your title contenders are, Champions League contenders are, Europa League contenders are, and also who you think will get relegated this season. So please, comment below, let me know, and I will see you guys again soon.